Voters in New Hampshire and Iowa have put Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg ahead of everybody else in the Democratic presidential race so far. Here to break down the results from yesterday's primary, two of our CBS News political contributors. That's Democratic strategist Jamal Simmons. He worked for Jamal Simons. Sorry, you're like, my last name
Simmons is fine. Simmons works.
Jamal Simmons worked for President Bill Clinton, and he advised President Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. And Robbie Mook, we know him well too, ran Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. They both join us at the table. Let's start with last night, guys, because it was a good night for Buttigieg and Sanders, but this is in no way a two-person race at this time. So what does New Hampshire say to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Bernie didn't, run away with it, right? It was a pretty close margin. And look, he did, around half of what he did 4 years ago. But the key is that was enough to win. And to your point, if this is a two-person race, the dynamic totally changes. If I'm Bernie Sanders right now, I want to keep this field wide so that if I'm getting that 25 to 30% of the vote, that's enough to win.
But they're saying he got the majority of the Hispanic vote in New Hampshire last night.
Which is, I don't think it's a big sample size. Like, let's just I think bigger sample size in Nevada.
Yeah. Jamal?
If this was a spades game, I'd say he's got three in a possible, right? We're down to Bernie. We got Bernie, we got Buttigieg. We also have Amy Klobuchar, who we can't write out of this.
Was that a surprise for you last night?
She did a good job. And then the possible would be Bloomberg, who's still coming. He's still out there.
Was Amy a surprise, though, for you last night?
She was a surprise in Iowa, right? But you started to see the movement. And there's been some evidence of this, that New Hampshire has a penchant for rallying around women candidates. They rallied around Hillary Clinton in 2008. They had Jeannie Shaheen, who was governor and senator. They had Maggie Hassan. So, people who was governor, New Hampshire has a habit of voting for women, right? And so the question was, I think a lot of people thought Elizabeth Warren was going to be that woman. Yeah. And it turned out it wasn't Elizabeth Warren, it was Amy Klobuchar. And that, I think, was a little bit more of a surprise.
So you've got two candidates now, Buttigieg and Klobuchar, who are ascendant in the moderate section of the party. And Bloomberg entering on Super Tuesday as this campaign widens out a lot. Do Klobuchar and Buttigieg have the infrastructure and the money to compete on a broader scale?
I mean, I was looking at some numbers. Back in October, Amy Klobuchar had 0 field offices in South Carolina. She had 0 field offices in Nevada. So I assume she's built that up since October, but she doesn't have that much money. At the end of January, she only had $5 million cash on hand. So I assume she's putting staff and people on the ground, but that means that they're just getting started. When you look at people like Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, they've been doing this for months. Bernie Sanders has been doing it for years. So it's a tough fight.
Quite remarkably, two names that we haven't been talking about, what I thought we might have been, would be Warren and Biden. Yeah. 5, 6 months ago, they would have been 1-2 in people's minds. Now they're 4-5. What's their future as this race broadens?
I think it's really tough. And I think the problem for Biden was his whole race was predicated on winning. I can win against Donald Trump. I will restore everything that's been taken away, from our country, the kind of leadership we had. And he came in so far behind in Iowa. And he came in so far behind last night. I think that message isn't ringing true.
But isn't he expected to win, though, Robbie, in South Carolina? I think he's expecting himself to win.
He is, right. And they keep saying, look, we've got communities of color that are going to be voting in a real way. It's the African-American vote is 2/3 of the vote in South Carolina. Yeah. We'll have to just see. But I honestly I think these voters are going to be practical. And I think if he can't win, people are going to go elsewhere. And we're already seeing Bloomberg, and according to the polls, pulling a bunch of that African-American support.
Does that surprise you, Jamal, that Bloomberg is pulling African-American support?
Yes, it was surprising. I mean, I think the thing that we know about Bloomberg, I think people who don't live in New York know about him, is this idea of stop and frisk and what he did in criminal justice reform. Yesterday, we all got hit with this audio tape of Bloomberg actually saying we should have thrown more people up against the wall and arrested more people.
The release of that tape, though, very suspicious.
The timing, right, exactly.
Yeah.
But, this is politics, and so this is when these things happen, is how it happens. So that's surprising. But I think a lot of African Americans want to beat Donald Trump, and so they're looking for the candidate who's going to be the strongest candidate to take Trump on. And if Bloomberg is that guy, I think that they're more open to it than we may have thought certainly more open to it than I thought a month or 6 weeks ago.
So voters already knew about the stop and frisk, or many of them did. Does the audio change things, or is it just sort of like an underscore of what we already knew to be the case?
Honestly, I don't know if it does. I mean, remember with Joe Biden, we had the busing incident. Yeah. This is the man who led the crime bill. With Hillary Clinton, there was a lot of talk about the crime bill. I think voters, just to reinforce what Jamal said, they want to win. They are going to go to the person they think can win.
Pete Buttigieg seems to have a problem with black voters. Why do you think that is?
So listen. I think when Bill Clinton ran for president in 1992, he was considered a conservative. They had union problems, all of that in Arkansas. But every African American who knew him in Arkansas said he was the greatest person that they knew. And he had a network built around the country. Yeah. You know, Buttigieg doesn't really have that kind of a network or those validators.
All right, Jamal, Robbie, thank you very much. We'll be right back. You're watching CBS This Morning.